Yo, what's up? It's your boy Carcino here, and let's get through it. And we're gonna do the top 5 hip-hop clubs in history of the genre. A lot of people might not agree. A lot of people might scream and yell. Be like, that's not it, that's the wrong one. Now I'm mad. But yet and still, it's my list. So without wasting further time, we move on. You know, I understand you young generation people might be coming in with Club Live and all of these other different clubs they got in Atlanta and Houston. They're going to be talking about grooves. You know, listen, we're going to give you the education on it. Go back to a lot of different things y'all didn't know nothing about. Now, number 5 on my list, the House of Blues in Los Angeles. The House of Blues. Not because Tupac did a thing there. Did his little show there and all that stuff. No, the House of Blues on the West Coast was one of the best clubs for hip-hop they ever had on the West Coast. When it first came out, the House of Blues was organized. It was a big stage and a big setting for hip-hop on the West Coast that really didn't have a lot for hip-hop. Wasn't really designed for rap and hip-hop at all. It was designed to be a club for entertainment for rock bands and musicians. But once rap got involved, it took it over. And the House of Blues became the outlet, the major outlet for hip-hop concerts. And even it started to expand and go all over the place, from Boston to Chicago. When you went to the House of Blues, the seats were comfortable, the venue was nice, the upstairs upper deck was professional. You felt like you was actually in VIP when you were sitting in VIP. And these were the things to do, you know, at that time. A lot of great performances there at the house. So, House of Blues is number 5 on the list. And yes, I'm showing Tupac at the House of Blues because that's what you guys relate to the most. Really, if I didn't, when I talk the House of Blues, people, oh yeah, Tupac, House of Blues, I'll be like, oh wow, that shows you how impactful he was. But let's go on to number 4. Number 4 is a surprise on the list. Frankie Knuckles and Robert Williams and everybody who invented and came up with the Warehouse in Chicago, Illinois. The Warehouse was one of the biggest. It was a former warehouse. Used to be a clothing store that was emptied out and turned into a nightclub. And they had one of the longest running nightclubs in history, from all walks of life, all throughout. But what birthed out of here was a music that no one ever thought of or heard of. And what it was mixed of was old European type sounds from overseas, mixed with fast disco records here in Chicago, and all around disco was out. And they would just mix them up and use bass, and all of these things end up transforming into some of the beats we start hearing later on. But it created house music. Then there was a debate. House music wasn't hip hop, and they clashed. And here in the city, but the outlet and the place for it was the warehouse, which is how house music came, because it came from the warehouse. Get it? Warehouse, take house music. Because that's what the first time Frankie Knuckles put those musics together and made the cut. Now, we've all heard It's Time for the Percolator. It's time for the percolator. It's time for the percolator, which is one of the biggest house records ever made. But house started to branch over into pop music with Pump Up the Volume. Pump up the volume, pump up the volume, dance, dance. So that started to expand it, and it started to go to other places. You know, we would hear bang, 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 ski, 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 bang, 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 ski, ski, ski. So when Lil Jon did that, that song had already been out of here since the 90s. Bang, 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 ski, 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 bang, 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 ski, 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 bang, 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 ski, ski, ski. All these stuff we heard in Chicago way before all of that stuff even took place. So it was funny to me when Lil Jon mentioned it. Bang, bang, ski, ski, So I'm like, oh, wow, they was listening to house music way back then. And they just brought it all back. And they actually had a house song called Beat That Chick with a Bat. 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 Yeah, those were some classics back then. I don't make the rules. But other people hated the house music. And it's trash. That's not hip hop. Now they start rapping to those beats, and the rest is history. But the warehouse is, where that stuff came from. But they had a very high homosexual rate going to that club, and they had like the nights where it was like gay music stuff, and then that started blending in with the house, and that changed forever. Now, here is the other New York nightclub that no one talks about at all. And it was the scene for the most celebrities to show up at a nightclub, but nobody talks about it. And this was built off hip hop. And this is the Building Nightclub at number 3. The Building Nightclub was one of the most quietest things in the early 90s. This was it. The Building. Who remembers The Building? You have to be like older to remember, because this is where Red Alert got his like shine on in the early 90s. DJ Clark Kent, they all had their nights that they were, DJ and Red Alert sets would be the hottest, and he would just rip it down. And it was crazy in there. You had all the celebrities in there, and this was the first club to really have a success. After watching the model, it had like a LA type of appeal as far as fashion. They would take Polaroid shots of like all the people coming in. It was it. I mean, people are blowing me up right now. I don't even know why. But the Building was it. That was one of the favorite spots out there. You saw Heavy D. You saw like all the early music in the 90s that sold. that was underground, like the Smith and Wesson, Black Moon, Black Sheep. All of those guys had a platform because of these clubs. They played their music, and the people got to hear it and run out and buy it. And these are the smaller little rap groups who couldn't really go out worldwide and sell. This is how they were selling records. And people, it was spanning from one coast to another, because people who would visit New York would go to the Building nightclub. They would travel to these nightclubs and hear these records and be like, oh, this record's hot. I got to have it here and take it back with me to the West Coast. Then they'll play it on the West Coast, and then that's how you have people like Smith and Wesson selling like almost 1 million records, and they were popping way out in the West Coast. And people like, how you ain't know about them? Because they was playing their joints in the club, in the hip-hop spots. That's how it works. That was the design of the hip-hop clubs, is to have your record played in the club. And the building was that. This was almost, believe me, the building could have been like almost number one. From A Tribe Called Quest, Mike Tyson, Chris Rock, all of them were at the building. You know, the vibe changed there because they had a lot of, you know, things that happened later on. You know, people started getting into fights and shootouts, but everybody used to have to take a picture with like Polaroid, and that was your ID to get in there. Leor Cohen and Russell Simmons, you know, they start putting out, you know, guys that come there all the time, and you got everybody would show up, from Gangstar to some of Justine Bateman. You know, she hung out there. Like Madonna came there before. This was a spot where people came to kick it. New York models. This was it. So shout out to everybody who created the building and put it together. The architectural design is probably still right now better than most clubs you've ever seen. So shouts out to the building. And that came in at number 3. And believe me, it was almost number 2. Number 2 got it because of this long-standing historical value and the long-running staple for hip-hop. It was the staple for underground rap artists, but it wasn't even designed for that. The Tunnel. The Tunnel at number 2 in New York was it for the new wave of rap. The new wave meaning that 94 crowd on through. That was it. That was your area. That was what you grew up in. The building had more of a grown rap type of appeal with Fab Five Freddy, and all these rappers was 20 something going on 40. You know, 35. You know, they had a whole different vibe when it came to rap and hip hop. That the young people that went there were young adults. These are the adolescent kids that they've neglected or forgotten about, and they're like 16 and 17 and 18 and like 94. And here comes this club called The Tunnel, where they could all get in, no matter what, as long as they're entertainers. And the nightclub was like, it was like a tunnel to get in. You go all the way down this long tunnel. You got in, they had the right security there, and they had this co-ed like bathroom where it's like men and women both using the bathroom like in the same area. It was totally weird stuff going on in the tunnel. And this is the first nightclub I've seen that prostitution was rampant. It was like the bouncers were security guards, you know, and they had to get money on the cut. Like, look, I want 20% of your take when you go in there. It's like strip club. You going to the champagne room. You going in the back for a dance. Here, you going in the back to cut something. And then you got to cut off whatever your take is to the bouncer. When you come out, he want 20%. And then he going to watch out. You seen all kind of stuff in there. People having crazy sex in there. And fights with boyfriends and bouncers. And that's my girl. But it also provided a platform for hip-hop. For the new age. And it was getting no press. It wasn't about getting the sharpest and dressing up. You could come, look like you fell out of bed and walk right into the tunnel and fit right in. But they had a lot of high, like, hip-hop night was only like maybe one night. Maybe 1 or 2 nights only in the tunnel a week. Other than that, the tunnel was almost artsy, homo rave type thing. On the other nights. So I'm like, wow, that's the tunnel? They was like, no, you got to go on hip hop nights. But it gave us the platform when nightclubs and stuff was really small and dying out. Here is like one of the last remaining clubs that you could go mingle with celebrities, and you know, and they could hang out with these were like the B-list celebrities, but they were cool. Like Naomi Campbell would show up there, you know, and stuff like that from time to time. But then it got too raunchy and just like people were like, I can't deal with this atmosphere, and then too much violence outside of it, and there you go. It's gone just as quick as it came. Now, number 1 on this list is like basically my favorite. My complete favorite. And nobody will take it from me. It is definitely number 1. And that's it. I mean, really, there's nothing else you could put above this club. And this is it. I mean, I've thought about it. I'm sitting here. I say, man, what could I actually put above this club? And there was nothing. I couldn't find anything to put above this club. And you know what I came out with? I had no answer, but number 1 is definitely, and I mean definitely, the Disco Fever. The Disco Fever is the best nightclub ever for hip hop. Sal, if you watch the movie Crush Groove, that's the Disco Fever. They filmed 90% of that movie inside of the Disco Fever. And it was all about, we got to perform at the Fever. We got to perform at the Fever. We got to perform at the Fever. That was it. Because if you was trying to get into rap, that was it. You had to get into the Fever. If you didn't perform on the Disco Fever, you could forget about it. Now, the Disco Fever was a club when the disco music came out, and like the 80s, and you know, they was like, all right, it's a dance floor. We're going to get everybody in the Fever, and let them go for it, and that was it. Then once rap started coming in there with Curtis Blow, and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, people was like, man, the Fever was it. That was like Star Search. You had people in there, they had talent shows, and Sal would be in there, who was the bartender, but he also ended up owning the place and running the joint. And with Curtis Blow and everybody else, they put on shows there. Like, it was like full-length shows. It ain't just one guy on stage. These guys was getting the crowd into it, and they kept the floor moving. I mean, the Disco Fever is where the Fat Boys got their break. Run DMC got started, ripping the Fever. So this is it. This is like the core of hip hop. Ice-T was in the Fever. He was in the breakdance spot in LA, but he came out, also rocked the Fever. A lot of these dudes that came up in this game came here. A lot of people that didn't win the talent shows at the time was still sponsored, by like Coca-Cola, all these different things that they could use to push over. But the Disco Fever was it. The Sugar Hill Gang, LL Cool J, Star Child. You had that was it. I mean, shoot, the Disco Fever, man. If you couldn't get into the Fever, you wasn't popping. So to get on that stage, you had to impress somebody somewhere to get on that stage. And as far as the atmosphere of the Fever, everybody in the club was more than satisfied because it was all hip hop. It was all everything R&B. What was R&B back then? Disco sounding, Sheila E. It wasn't as big as the nightclubs now. You can only probably fit 300 people in there. But it was enough. It was enough. It was more than enough. And then there was a young guy out there with Grandmaster Cash and a big old winter coat named Kool Mo D sitting out there at the Fever. Barely could get in there. And he wanted to be on that stage. LL Cool J got up there. Young LL at 17 years old. 17. Walking around on stage. Rocking the Fever. At 17. So you had to have an it factor. And this is where a lot of careers started, buddy. And I'm out.